until their dying weeks, and it was not always possible to track them down. Many had become so caught up in their own lives that they had let golden friendships slip by over the years. There were many deep regrets about not giving friendships the time and effort they deserved. Everyone misses their friends when they are dying. The fifth one is, I wish I had let myself be happier. This is a surprisingly common one. Many did not realize until the end that happiness is a choice. They had stayed stuck in old patterns and habits. The so-called comfort of familiarity overflowed into their emotions as well as their physical lives. Fear of change had them pretending to others and to themselves that they were content, when deep within they longed to laugh properly and have silliness in their life again. And in respect to that, I also mentioned this idea about, that sometimes people have then this thought, shall I do the career thing or should I do the spiritual thing? They think it's like a choice. So I think that's not really a good way of thinking, because again, if we give up our career, how are we going to financially support ourselves? And if that's the one thing we're good at, we've given up the one opportunity we have to really benefit in the world. So rather we should try and integrate the two, to use our talents to be able to benefit the world in more meaningful ways. And I think to help do that integration, we really need to shift this worldview that we have. So if our worldview is focusing on, for pleasure, wealth, praise and reputation, that we need more of that, then we're looking outside of ourselves. And then, of course, it's all about what we can get from the world. Then it doesn't matter what career you have, even if you have a very high-level career job, you're never going to be satisfied. No, never. Whereas if we can shift that worldview, instead of focusing on wealth, pleasure, praise and good reputation, focusing on inner well-being, genuine happiness, then it's much more about what we bring to the world. And then no matter what sort of career or what we're doing, that can be rewarding and fulfilling. And on that point, I'd like to read a little bit from an email I received a year or two ago from a person who did 1 or 2 courses with me in India. He says the following. About 2 years ago, I participated in your 7-point mind training course at Tushita. And many times during the past 2 years, I was thinking about sending you a mail and telling you how much those 9 precious days meant to me, and how much in my life sparked out of inspiration and insights gathered during those days. After the course, I returned home and picked up my life just where I left it, teaching science in high school. But so much had changed. My approach to my work, my life, my friends and my pupils had changed. Some weeks into the term, I was teaching 11-year-olds for the first time in my life. I started beginning my lessons with little awareness exercises. Those youngsters are so bouncy after breaks, so I was looking for a method to get them focused in class without using force. I taught the benefits of sitting upright for keeping focused, and then little awareness exercises like observing the breath, listening to sounds, tasting chocolate properly, and so on. It took around 3 minutes before the beginning of class. But somehow it changed everything. To my amazement, the kids just loved doing these exercises. I started to use these techniques also in my other classes from 14 to 18-year-olds. And the same thing happened. They started to demand the exercises. And somehow using these methods, it created a real bonding between my students and myself, culminating in my students asking me to make the speech at their prom at the end of their high school years, which was pretty amazing. So we don't need a high-powered career to have a very rewarding life. So it's really about what we bring to the world, not what we can get. Of course, if we want to develop, then we need continuity is the key to progress, and so therefore that means a daily meditation practice to internalize and also then integrating into daily life. And as we've seen in all Buddhist traditions, the core practices are ethics, concentration and wisdom. So on the basis of an ethical lifestyle, we engage in this shamatha practice to cultivate a calm, clear, focused mind. And then on that basis, we engage in the wisdom of vipassana practice. And of course, we are to balance that with the compassion wing of practice. So these are really the main core areas of practice. Ethical basis, cultivating a calm, clear, focused mind. On that basis, cultivating wisdom and compassion. And of course, we need to put effort into this. But again, to overcome laziness. But again, this effort is not like we have to grit our teeth and push our way through this. Because remember, effort here is joyous effort. In Buddhism, effort is a mind, it's defined as a mind that delights in virtue, a mind that's happy to do good things. So therefore, if we can see the benefits of these various practices, we'll be happy to do them, we'll joyfully do them, we'll be enthusiastic. So it's important that in whatever practices we do to keep this enthusiastic mind, joyful mind. Otherwise it becomes a hardship and we're just going to give it up. And also from Shantideva, remember he said, no matter how difficult something seems, everything with practice becomes easy. So all you need to do is practice, 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 and it'll become easy. It'll become second nature. And then of course, when difficulties arise in our practice and in daily life, again, if we see them as problems or obstacles, all that's going to happen is we'll have aversion to them, they'll become bigger, and we'll probably react in a very appropriate way. So rather than see them as problems or obstacles, to see them as opportunities. And again here, to be able to do this, I think, if we can shift that worldview. Because if we have, again, this worldview of, I need more wealth, pleasure, praise and good reputation, then we're looking out there. And then, of course, if we do that, the world will appear not very user-friendly because there'll be things obstructing us from getting more wealth, more pleasure, more praise and good reputation. So then, of course, everything becomes a problem and then we'll have aversion. Rather, if we shift that worldview to the inner well-being, genuine happiness, then of course it's about what we can bring to the world, which means then difficult situations give us an opportunity to bring something more to the world. So instead of seeing them as problems, obstacles, there'll be opportunities to practice compassion, to develop ourselves as a person and so forth. So I think this also is very helpful. And of course, as I've already mentioned, we need like-minded friends, this idea of Sangha, to help support us and to support others, and so to gather together regularly to support each other, to reflect on things, to meditate a little bit maybe, and that's going to be very helpful. In fact, almost essential, I would say. And the other thing, of course, what's very helpful is to do some retreat, at least once or twice a year, to do a retreat, such as the one we've done here for 10 days, because it really gives us like a boost and brings us to a new level and makes us, hopefully gets us more enthusiastic, and deepens the practice. So therefore I very much encourage you to find those places to go for these group retreats. As a beginner, if we try to do solitary retreat, I think you're going to find it very difficult. So it's best to start with group retreats, and once we have done some of those, then of course on top of that, or we can then do a little bit of solitary retreat. But again, start short, maybe just for half a day, and then maybe 2 days, a long weekend, and build up. Otherwise, I think if you, from the very beginning, think, okay, I'm going to do a week solitary retreat, I think you're going to find it very, very difficult, because in a solitary retreat, you have to be very self-disciplined and self-motivated and so forth. And there's always things to distract you. Whereas in a group retreat, of course, the structure is there, it's guided, and you also have the group energy to support you. Much easier as a beginner. So that's just some general advice. So maybe now some advice about setting up, how to set up the day to integrate things into our life. So, of course, daily meditation practice is very, very helpful, very important. And, of course, to set a good motivation, not only for meditation, but set a good motivation for the day. So here I've got an example of, I think, a very good motivation we can start our day with every day. And it's from His Holiness Dalai Lama, and he says, "Every day, think as you wake up, today I'm fortunate to have woken up. I am alive, I have a precious human life, I'm going to use all my energies to develop myself, to expand my heart out to others. I'm going to have kind thoughts towards others, I'm not going to get angry or think badly about others. I'm going to benefit others as much as I can." And the short version of that is, every day, think as you wake up, I'm going to benefit others as much as I can. So I think this is a very good motivation to start each day with. And then, of course, in terms of meditation practice, one of the most difficult things is just to develop the habit. Which means if you're meditating at different times every day, you're not really developing a habit. So therefore, it's helpful to find a time that works for you and then stick to that time and meditate at the same time each day. And then, of course, it will become a habit. And to make a habit, I think modern studies show that you need to do something at least about 25 days in a row, even to begin the habit. So what can be very helpful here is to set yourself a challenge, because we all like challenges. So you can set yourself, like, maybe start with like a 7-day challenge. The next 7 days I'm going to meditate every day. And then you can expand, you can say you can do a 30-day challenge. For every day for the next 30 days I'm going to meditate. Set a challenge, and then I think that'll be helpful to establish that habit. Now, of course, in terms of how long to meditate, I mentioned a number of times, quality over quantity. So if you're meditating too long, you're just going to drift into dullness and distraction, the very things you're trying to overcome. So pick an amount of time that works for you. So in this retreat, we did some 20-minute sessions, and then we were doing these 2 15-minute sessions back to back. So, you know, this is 15 to 20 minutes for as beginners is a good amount of time, but some people may find that they can meditate a bit longer, so maybe 25 minutes or a little bit less, 15. So pick an amount of time that you can sustain. And it's very helpful, particularly as a beginner again, to use a timer when we meditate. Because if we don't use a timer, one of two things will happen. On days where things are not going so well, maybe we sit down to meditate, mind is very negative, very agitated, distracted. We try to get into the meditation, we try. After 5 or 10 minutes, we just go, oh, it's too difficult, I give up. That's not a good thing to do, because like everything in life, if we give up whenever things get difficult, then we're not developing that habit. We're not developing perseverance. So therefore, if we set a timer, then you'll find that if it's difficult, you'll persevere, which is very good. We need that perseverance in meditation and in daily life in general. So that's going to help develop perseverance when things are difficult. And on other days, if we don't set a timer and things are going really well, then what we do, of course, is we meditate. Oh, it's going really well. And then we keep going. And of course, we keep going until when? Until it's not going so well and we stop. And the thing we remember most about meditation is how it ended. So if it's always ending in frustration, distraction, and so forth, we're going to start to associate meditation with not such good experiences. We're not going to want to meditate again. Whereas if we set a timer and it's going well, we stop, that's what we remember, and then we'll be enthusiastic about meditating again the following day. So setting a timer is very, very helpful. And then, of course, as we get deeper into the practice, we will need to extend the amount of time we meditate. But always quality over quantity. And if we want to meditate longer in the morning, but we can't sustain it, then do like we did here. You know, if you want to meditate 30 minutes, you can't sustain it, break it into 2 15-minute sessions with a little break in the middle. But always quality over quantity. What to meditate on? So we've seen here that sort of the 3 main areas of practice are the shamatha, the developing a calm, clear mind, and then on that basis the 2 wings of wisdom and compassion. So therefore, particularly if we find ourselves not very good attention skills, a lot of dullness and distraction, I would tend to emphasize the shamatha practice as one of the core practices we engage in the morning practice. But what I wouldn't recommend is only doing that practice, because I think this is a little bit unbalanced. But we could have that as one of our core practices, one of the main practices we do, but then definitely I would certainly supplement it with something from the compassion wing and from the wisdom wing. So again, the compassion wing, things like loving kindness and compassion, empathetic joy, equanimity, and the wisdom wing, we looked at briefly the idea of impermanence, suffering, no self and emptiness. So to bring in a little bit of that, and you can bring in that as you feel it's more important, but maybe at a certain period you feel you need to really work on more compassion, so you can add that a little bit more in. So what you can do then is in the morning session, for example, if you're just doing one session, you could start with a little bit of shamatha and then do the whole shamatha, or start with a bit of shamatha and then move to either a wisdom or compassion practice. Or what you could do, of course, is if you're doing 30 minutes in 2 15-minute sessions, you can do 15 minutes of shamatha and the second half do another practice like the loving kindness, compassion or vipassana practice. So that would go together well. And then of course, if we want any of these practices to develop, we need to integrate them into daily life. So remember, every practice has 2 parts, meditation and integrating into daily life. So therefore, particularly now for the shamatha practice, to integrate that in daily life, we're talking about continuing to cultivate mindfulness in daily life. So therefore, of course, what we can do at the beginning of the day is just have the idea, I'm going to be mindful as possible the entire day, but probably after a few minutes we've sort of forgotten that idea. So therefore, as a beginner, to help, we need something to remind us to be mindful. We need what's called triggers to remind us. And triggers can take a number of forms. One classical form, of course, is that pick certain activities that you do regularly each day, and then whenever you do these activities, make a conscious effort to be fully present in that activity. A classic example, of course, is brushing the teeth. That we do that usually 2 or 3 times a day. So, and now often what happens, of course, is we're running late for work, we're brushing our teeth quickly, thinking about all the things we have to do that day. We run out the door and then we think, did I brush my teeth? And we don't even really remember. So therefore, when we're brushing our teeth, we don't want to be brushing our teeth and thinking about all sorts of other things at the same time, but be fully focused on the action of brushing the teeth, the sensations on the teeth and the gums and everything that goes with that. So be fully present. Similarly, eating meals. Now, of course, particularly at lunchtime at work, maybe we've got a short time for lunch breaks, so we're gulping down some food and thinking about all the things we have to do that afternoon, and we're not really even enjoying the food. So again, when you're eating meals, be fully present in the action of eating the food. And that's a mindfulness exercise, and of course you'll enjoy the food more than you normally do if you do that as well. So pick some physical activities that you do regularly and make a conscious effort always to be present in those. But also, of course, we can use modern technology as a trigger. So, you know, we can use these smartphones. There are many apps that you can get that do this job, that you can program a little mindfulness app that will remind you at regular intervals to do something. And sometimes inbuilt is a little mindfulness exercise, or sometimes it's just a little bell that goes off. And when that happens, then just stop whatever you're doing, and then for just 3 breaths, just become aware of the sensations of the breath or the rhythm of the breath. Or maybe for 10 seconds, just observe the mind and what's going on in the mind. Keep this mindfulness exercise short, because if it's too big, too much time, you're not going to do it. You'll give it up. So keep it very short, and you'll be surprised at how maybe just even once an hour on average, doing a little mindfulness exercise throughout the day will start to get us really much more in the habit of being mindful throughout the day. So of course then, with that mindfulness, we then simply are to observe whatever's going on around us in our life. A little bit like this open awareness practice that we did briefly earlier in the tree. Now, of course, without this mindfulness, some stimulus comes and we tend to just react out of habit. If it's pleasant, we react often with attachment. If it's unpleasant, with aversion. So, of course, we want to break that cycle of stimulus reaction, because that stimulus reaction is just creating mental afflictions and suffering. So therefore, to break that cycle, we need to have more this mindfulness. We need to become aware of the stimulus before we react. So we have that little window of opportunity. So again, just to notice when stimulus comes, to notice the stimulus and notice any reactions that are arising in our mind, and not get caught up in them. Just watch them as they arise and pass. So that's why this practice we did of observing the mind is very helpful, because it really we can bring that into daily life in this way of simply observing whatever's coming our way and not to react to that. And also, of course, another thing that can be very helpful here in terms of mindfulness is, again, whenever we're doing any sort of physical activity, walking or something, is switch off that conceptual mind, obsessive compulsive thinking. Be in the senses. Be fully present in the senses. And also, as I mentioned already, when difficulties arise in our life, to not see them as problems or obstacles, because if we do, we're just going to develop aversion, overreact, and create more problems, suffering. So therefore, rather to see these difficult situations as opportunities, challenges to work through, to develop as a person. And again, if we see suffering in others or ourselves, we can use this Glen practice to cultivate loving kindness and compassion, to then actually help others more, and also to not react to our own suffering with aversion, practice this acceptance and use that as an opportunity to cultivate loving kindness and compassion for ourselves and others. So that's some things which we can do during the day. And then at the end of the day, then of course, if we have time for another meditation session in the evening, very good, very good. And if we do, then maybe we could do, for example, the Shamatha in the morning and the compassion or vipassana in the evening. So we can do the two different meditations there. That'd be very good. But some of us, of course, have family responsibilities in the evening, maybe some other responsibilities, maybe we're very tired from work and so forth. So I think at least what we can do before we go to sleep is two things. One, at the end of the day, we can review our day. How did our day go? And then maybe pick 1, 2, or maximum 3 things, not so good things we did during the day. And then we can purify our mind of those negative habits by going through what's called the 4 opponent powers. I don't think did I mention them already? No. So these are 4 things we can do to really start to purify our mind of our negative habits. So then, again, at the end of the day, review our day, pick maybe 1, 2, or 3 things that were not so good that we did during the day. The first thing to do is to develop some sincere regret for having done that thing. Of course, not to feel guilty, because guilty is, from cognitive fusion, is wrongly identifying ourselves with that negative behaviour, whereas regret is simply acknowledging that negative behaviour and regretting it. So that's one thing we can do. The second thing we can do is what's called reliance or foundation. It means to reaffirm our positive direction in life. Because if we've done something harmful or negative, we've sort of fallen down from the positive direction that we want to follow in our life. So reliance is simply about reaffirming our positive direction that we want to follow our life. And third one is remedy. So remedy is to think of some sort of practical remedy for the negative thing we did. For example, if we verbally abuse someone at work, the remedy could be, okay, tomorrow morning I'm going to apologise to them. So pick something positive opposite of the negative behaviour. If for some reason you can't do something directly positive opposite to the negative behaviour, then any positive behaviour with the motivation of wishing to overcome that negative habit is effective. And then the fourth point is resolve. To make a strong determination not to do that negative thing again. But here we need to be very practical, because if the negative thing we've done is a very strong habit, there's no point in saying, I'm never going to do this again, because it's not going to happen. So if it's a very strong habit, make a time limit and say, okay, tomorrow I'm not going to do that thing, or for the next 24 hours I'm not going to do it. If that's way too difficult, for the next hour I'm not going to do that. Way too difficult, for the next 5 minutes I'm not going to do it. Pick an amount of time with effort you can normally manage. Then, over time you can extend that from 5 minutes to 10 minutes to an hour to a day, a week, a month, a year, the rest of your life. So then you can even break strong habits. So if we can do that, those 4 things, with maybe 1, 2 or maximum 3 things that we didn't do very well during the day, this is a very strong way of reducing and purifying our mind of those negative habits. But I think equally important, particularly in our modern society where we have this obsessive focus on the negative, is also review our day and look at the good things we did during the day and pick 1, 2 or 3 good things we did during the day. And then, of course, we can rejoice in those activities. So again, not praising ourselves, thinking we're good, but rejoicing or praising our behaviour. And then the second thing we can do is, like resolve here, make a strong determination to continue to do that good behaviour. In that way we can strengthen our positive behaviours. So that's something we can do, I think, helpful to do at the end of every day, to really start to work on reducing any negative habits and start to increase positive habits. And then one more thing we can do before going to sleep, and that's what we've been doing, of course, at the end of each day here, is to do the Shavasana practice. So then you would, at home, of course, you'd get into bed, you'd go into the Shavasana posture, as we did here, and do a little breathing exercise, a little mindfulness exercise. Because sometimes also, if we've had a very busy, hectic day at work and so forth, often our mind is still sort of churning over a lot, and maybe a bit of agitation and tension in the body. We try to go to sleep and we're tossing and turning and tense and agitated, and mind going, churning around. We can't really sleep very well. So then, this is perfect. So then we go into the Shavasana posture, and then on every out-breath you release any tension in the body. On every out-breath you're releasing any thoughts in the mind. Just relaxing, 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 releasing tension and thoughts. And do that as long as you can maintain some alertness. When your mind starts to get drowsy, you mentally note, okay, my meditation's finished, and then you physically move out of that position into whatever position you use for sleep. So this is a good way, that's a mindfulness practice, and also a good way to transition to sleep. And also, of course, if you wake up in the middle of the night and you have a hard time getting back to sleep, you know, often we're lying there and we go, I have to sleep, I've got to work tomorrow, I've got to sleep, I've got to sleep, and get agitated and we can't sleep. So again, if you wake up and you can't get back to sleep, go back into the Shavasana posture, relaxing the body, releasing any thoughts, and I think you'll probably go to sleep quite quickly. And even if you don't, because you're so relaxed, you're going to get a lot of the benefits of sleep anyway. So that's something we can do at the end of every day. Okay, so that's all I wanted to really say. So we've got a little bit of time for if there's any last